Good morning. It is Tuesday, so we are talking unique, not different, where we want inclusive HSE practices in T&T.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unique Not Different with me, Shamla. Today, I have Mr. Surindra Basdeo, who is the manager at the Trinidad and Tobago Disabled Peoples International, and he also his background is in HSE, health and safety. Mr. Basdeo has a disability, and he's here for part one. Next week we have part two to talk about gaps in HSC practices for persons with disabilities. So good morning, Mr. Basdeo. How are you doing? We're not hearing you properly, Mr. Basdeo. How are you doing? I think Mr. Basdeo is having some issues. Mr. Basdeo, can you hear me? Guys, I think Mr. Basdeo is having some audio issues. It tends to happen when we are digital is very unpredictable sometimes. No, we're not hearing you properly.
All right, guys. Well, we're having some technical difficulties there with Shamla inside the Unique Not Different. We're going to try and see how best we can sort it out, of course, to try and bring you that information as soon as possible. But, of course, we try our best to see if we can sort it out. The challenge with technology is always so interesting, Natasha.
Because, yes, definitely.
You never know when it's going to go down. So Shamla is on the line there, standing by. Hopefully, we can get Mr. Basdeo's technical things sorted out as soon as possible.
Yes, hoping that we are going to get that sorted out, because this is a critical conversation, needless to say, when it comes to inclusion, as we see Trinidad and Tobago continue to make strides, especially in the HSE space. So it's good to see that we're having these conversations. As always, Shamla ensures that the conversations are, of course, inclusive, but informative as well throughout the Caribbean region. Trinidad and Tobago continues to make an impact, so really hoping that we're going to be able to get that connection up and running here.
Yeah, and it's very interesting when you think about it, right? Because we talk about HSE practices and we talk about inclusion. However, it's always interesting that we don't ever think about it from the perspective of disabled people. But let's see if we can get that interview back up and running. Shamla, good morning.
Yes, thanks, team. So, Surindra, I would like to start off. How would you assess the current state of HSE practices in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly regarding inclusion of persons with disabilities?
First of all, good morning to each and every one of you. In the correction of the HSE, I would when my attempt is changing the cultural practices of Indian and Black, right? Because that people need to embrace it, right? And become aware of persons with disability in the area, right? In order to come, right, to lift the standard of each, right? Generally speaking, HSE does not, if you look at the fundamentals of HSE and the inclusiveness, right? The USHA code is designed, it's based on interpretation, right? So we interpret design policies and people have working guidelines for persons with disabilities. But it all has to do with interpretation of the act.
So, what are some specific risks or oversight you've seen in local HSE system that could put persons with disability at a greater risk?
But when we look at HSE generally, right? In Trinidad and Tobago, we have We have the people, as we refer to them, people with disability, persons with disability, and persons without disability, right? But each of us are exposed to the same amount of risk, right? At, um, at a certain level. And then persons with disability, because of if you have um, mobility problems and moving and this type of thing, unable to read signs and guidelines and this type of thing, they challenging the person with disability, which of course are further risk. So strategically, what you need to do is post and sign those signs and conduct training sessions with persons with disability, right? Um, engaging them and letting them know how to use and use the signs to communicate with them, right? Persons with mild learning disability and these type of things. For physical disability, you might want to encourage for the body system and this type of thing when there's emergency in the workplace. You have somebody assigned to a particular person who has a disability to assist them, right, and help them in the event of an emergency. In developing the policies and the guidelines of these things, right? What we have in our ASHA, right, and what I consider to be a loophole, right? Whereas a loophole is something called so far as reasonably practicable, right? And that is where as we go the interpretation, goes with the employer and employer interpretation of what we deem to be reasonably practicable, right? And that could be also considered in the context of physical structure and financial input into creating physical structures, persons with disability in case of a emergency there that will invested into the training and awareness. If it is feasible to organizations or persons with disability to have this type of um, training session, if it is if it is if it will be feasible for them. So that's why the term reasonably practicable is
Yeah.
something more based on what you'll say, well, expect the employer to apply something called due diligence, right? And then create the best working environment for best system for the person in the, the working area. But that doesn't mean it doesn't limit the person with disability, right? Right? Somebody without that disability in the work area, right? And in the case of an emergency, right? Um, you would have you would have people rushing out that building and one some employee does not have a disability gets after one of the three break or something like that. How are you
Yeah.
going to take the person out of the building, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the emergency response plan and this safety management system, right? If it is developed according to the, the strategy of what the safety management plan require and what the emergency plan require, right? If it's developed according to that, it will include persons with disability,
Yeah.
right? But generally across the board, in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have problems with even um, companies, organizations, these type of places, right? Willing to embrace disability um, even to even embrace HSE,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? So it is a challenge. It's really a challenge, right?
Yeah.
We do lack data when it comes to that.
So I think what basically what you're saying is that equitable inclusion, because there are more than one type of disabilities, and they have to cater for these types of disabilities. Somebody is blind and visually impaired, somebody who is deaf and hard of hearing, a physical disability, a learning disability, a cognitive disability. All these disabilities have to be considered when drafting a HSE policy for a company, and that should be wide expanding. I think that is what you're basically saying, right? In terms of, yeah. So in terms of legislation reform, do you think that there should be a reform in the legislation standards in Trinidad and Tobago to be more supportive and inclusive?
Well, again, go back to the term, the, these are legal aspects we're looking at here, right? So I'll say my opinion on this one, because that fact that is a legal aspect, and is the laws, it can be tricky when it comes to how our OSHA will develop what it states, right? Because that seems to be reasonably practical, and the application of due diligence of the employers to get the persons with disability or even persons without disability, right? And when you leave that in their court, right, it could be challenging where I have cases that persons where they think it's reasonably practicable, and that is not what it's supposed to be. So that is part of the act, right?
Okay.
One of the biggest problems we will face persons with and without disability. So I would say I will think it needs some reform.
Okay. Okay, so on what role should training and awareness play in equipping HSE officers and staff to better serve diverse abilities in the workplace?
Could you repeat that question?
Sure. What role should, so quickly, can you just tell us, like, what role should training and awareness play in equipping HSE officers and staff to better serve diverse abilities in the workplace?
Right. Yes. Staff. Remember, you need staff to to become aware, right, and receive this type of training, right? Would be recommended that they receive the training, that they know how to communicate, right, and treat with persons with disability, right? Also, the embracing them into the workplace and bringing them into the workplace, because it could be a type of stereotype, right? If it's not somebody with a disability goes in to the working environment, and it could be stigmatized and stereotyped because of this disability, right? So you don't want that. You need your staff to become aware, right? Um, and like how recently the Minister of Social Development said that the government building, right, all government building would be accessible to persons with disabilities, right? Now they can only do that as far as for the government building, right? They cannot do it for the private sector, right? They can't enforce for the private sector because there's no law that states that because you have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you do that.
Yeah.
To
So
bring everybody aware and them to welcome that training awareness of the person with disability.
Mr. Basdeo, thank you so much. I know this is part one. I really hope the viewers heard what you were saying because your audio was a bit low, but definitely this was eye-opening in terms of HSC policies, practices for being equitable for persons with disability. I know next week we have part two where you share your lived experience because you are somebody with a disability in this field. Yeah. So Mr. Bazzi, I want to say thank you for coming and sharing your expertise in this field. It was an eye-opener, and we would see you next week for part 2, through your lived experience. Guys, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to this week's segment of Unique Not Different. As I always say, be good, do good. Bye, everyone.